I used to believe that the woman beside me would never betray me. I used to believe the people who laughed with me were my friends. And I used to think a short trip could rekindle the romance in a marriage. But I was wrong. Worse than betrayal is when it's disguised as a joke. And the worst part is when the person you trust the most is the first to laugh when you're being humiliated. I'm Jack, 34 years old, living in Oklahoma. I've been working in HVAC for nearly 10 years. I'm not wealthy, but I earn enough to support my family, pay the bills on time, and occasionally take my wife out for romantic dinners. I've been married to Laura for 6 years, an energetic woman, talkative, and extremely close with her college friends. They still meet up a few times a month, sometimes inviting me along, but I always felt out of place among their endless inside jokes. Over the past few months, Laura said I'd become cold, unromantic, and living like a 70-year-old man. She suggested we take a trip with her friends to bring the spark back. Honestly, I was glad she still wanted to fix things. The trip was 3 days long, heading to Colorado, specifically, a rustic-style resort in the mountains. Everyone seemed excited, laughing the whole way there. There were 6 of us, me, Laura, her 2 best friends, Jess and Mandy, and their boyfriends. I was the only one who hadn't gone to college with them, so it made sense that I felt a bit out of place. From day one, I noticed some strange things. For example, when I left the table to use the restroom, I came back to sudden silence. Then everyone burst out laughing like they just told a joke I wasn't supposed to hear. Laura looked at me and said, "Nothing, just girl talk." At first I let it go. Maybe they were just messing around. But when we arrived during room assignments, they had me sleep alone in a small cabin down the hill while the rest stayed in the main house. "So it's easier for cooking and hanging out," they said. Laura blinked at me and said, "It's only 3 nights, it's fine." I reluctantly agreed, though I felt a little uneasy. That night, I walked up to the main house for dinner, but by the time I got there, they'd already eaten and were dancing to music in the living room. "Why didn't anyone call me?" I asked, and got a casual response. "We thought you were resting." On day 2, the group went for a light hike nearby. I fell behind due to a sore left foot from tripping on a rock. When I got back to the resort, the car was gone. Laura texted me a short message. "You rest? We just went to town for some snacks. Be back soon." I waited until late afternoon. No one came back. That night, they finally returned, bringing wine, snacks, and a weird hanging LED lantern. Laura said, "Sorry. The party ran a little long." I nodded, trying to hide my irritation, but questions kept building up inside. I had no idea that the next morning, the 3rd day, everything would fall apart. I woke up early, stepped out of the cabin, and noticed something strange: silence. No laughter, no music, no people. The car was gone. The main house was locked from the outside. I called Laura, no answer. Back in the cabin, my phone was gone. I clearly remembered leaving it on the shoe rack, but it had disappeared. Then I saw a note taped to the door. "Don't be mad, it's just a prank. We'll come pick you up tonight." I stood frozen at the cabin door, scanning the area, hoping someone would jump out from the trees and yell, "Surprise! Just kidding!" But there was nothing. Only towering pine trees, the rising sun, and birds chirping in the distance. I went back into the cabin and searched for my phone. Just as I feared, it was gone. My wallet too. I hadn't brought any cash, since we were all using Laura's shared card for this trip. That uneasy feeling in my gut turned into a chilling realization. I had been completely abandoned. No phone, no money, no car, and no one around. I checked the mini fridge, empty. A single bottle of water and a small pack of crackers were all I had. With no other choice, I laced up my shoes and started walking uphill toward the road. It took nearly an hour of walking before I reached a paved road. Only the occasional car passed by. I waved several times, but hardly anyone stopped. Finally, a man driving a small truck named Rick pulled over and gave me a ride to a gas station in town, about a 15-minute drive away. Rick was kind and let me use his phone to call Laura. I dialed, no answer. Tried again, still nothing. I sent her a message, then logged into my old Facebook account. Thankfully, I remembered the password. Once in, I checked Laura's profile. And that's when everything inside me froze. She had just posted a series of stories less than an hour ago, photos of the group having lunch at a lively bar, laughing, toasting, dancing. A short video showed Laura laughing loudly as Jess said, "Jack's probably sleeping like a pig in the woods, huh?" And the whole group burst out laughing. No one looked guilty or remorseful. Not a single mention of me being left behind. No messages, no concern, no sign of the joke, notes saying they'd come back. My stomach clenched. That wave of betrayal hit me like a storm. I checked my inbox and found a single private message from Paul, Mandy's boyfriend. It was just one sentence. "I didn't agree with what they did. But she planned it all along, figured you should know." My hands were trembling. So this wasn't a joke. It was a plan. A cruel, premeditated game. I remembered the times Laura told me I was useless, that I was no longer an attractive man, that I didn't know how to have fun. Things I once thought were just fleeting frustrations. Turns out, she had been planning this for a while. I sat down on the pavement next to the gas station. The man named Rick handed me a can of water and quietly asked, "You all right?" I just nodded, unable to say a word. An hour later, I found a cheap motel thanks to Rick vouching for me. He said he'd be back the next day to help me get home to Oklahoma if I couldn't reach anyone. That night, I lay on an old, creaky bed, staring at the stained ceiling, wondering over and over, why? I wasn't a bad husband. I worked hard, I was patient, I made sacrifices. Was it because I didn't party, wasn't as funny as her friends? Was it because I wasn't her idea of fun? I didn't cry. I just felt empty. Close to midnight, I got a message from an old friend, Jason, who still kept loose contact with both me and Laura. His message made the trap even clearer. "I heard Laura talking to her friends a few weeks ago. She said, let's see how he handles being completely alone. He thinks he's the backbone. Leave him by himself for a few days, he'll panic like a trapped rat." I thought she was joking, but now it's obvious. I turned off the screen. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads. And I swore, if I had been left alone, then from now on, I'd walk on my own. There was no one left to trust. But nothing left to lose either. The next morning, I woke up in that rundown motel, thin sunlight filtering through the dusty curtains. I didn't remember when I had fallen asleep. My head pounded, and my chest felt heavy. The feeling of being betrayed by the person you love most, it's not like being punched. It's like someone squeezing your heart, second by second. I turned on the motel's borrowed phone, checking again, as if my mind still didn't want to believe it was real. But it was all still there. The laughing stories, the raised glasses, the music, Laura's shrill voice ordering food, someone joking. "Has Jack cried yet?" And then, a chorus of cruel laughter. I dropped my head onto the table and let out a long breath. At this point, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. This wasn't a harmless prank. This was humiliation, deliberate and orchestrated. Laura had planned everything. She took my wallet and phone, left me hundreds of miles from home, and kept partying with her friends as if I didn't exist. Everything was calculated. Me being isolated in the lower cabin, the car vanishing that morning, even the sloppy note taped to the door, it was all part of their plan. But the thing that hurt me most wasn't being left behind. It was the sheer disrespect. I used to think I wasn't a perfect husband, but at least I was dependable. I worked 10-hour days, rarely complained, tried to listen even when I didn't understand everything Laura said. I once turned down a business partnership because I was afraid of the risk it could bring to our married life. I always chose the safe route, thinking it was the right thing for our future. But to her, I was just a boring man who didn't know how to live. Maybe she was right, I didn't live by her standards. But that never gave her the right to humiliate me like this. Around noon, Rick, the kind man from the day before, came back as promised. He sat with me, listened to the whole story. Didn't judge. Just nodded and said, "You know, kind people get taken advantage of sometimes, but when they get back up, they never fall again." His words weren't flowery, but they hit like a wake-up slap. Before I thought of myself as the victim, the abandoned one. But now I was beginning to understand. I wasn't left behind because I was weak. I was left behind because they feared I might discover my worth if I ever walked away from them. I borrowed Rick's phone, called my neighbor, Joe, to ask him to keep an eye on my place for a few days. Joe was shocked. "Are you serious?" he asked. I said, "Yeah. But maybe it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." I didn't want Laura to know where I was. I didn't want her to come back for me, like she promised, because I wasn't there anymore. Not in body. Not in spirit. That evening, I sat alone outside the motel, looking up at the stars over the Colorado Highlands. A foreign sky. A place I was never supposed to remain. But right here, I finally felt a strange calm, not because I forgave, but because I now saw clearly what I had to let go of. And in my mind, a question echoed. If they truly saw me as a burden, why should I keep proving my worth to them? If my wife could be cruel enough to do this, does she really deserve a place in my future? And most importantly, do I want to live my whole life like a shadow just to please people who never truly valued me? For the first time, the answer was startlingly clear: no, no, and no. I decided I wouldn't go back to the way things were. I didn't tell Laura where I was. I didn't text her to complain. I didn't call to ask why. Because I didn't need a reason from someone who deliberately trampled on my trust. All I needed was a chance to start over, but this time for myself. And that chance, I would make it happen on my own. I left the small town early the next morning. Rick helped me one more time. He drove me to the nearest bus station, nearly 30 miles away. Before we parted, he shook my hand firmly and said, "You've got two choices, Jack. 1. Go back to being who you were. Or 2. Use this fall to step out of the shadows." Throughout the long bus ride back to Oklahoma, I sat quietly by the window, watching the sparse mountain ranges fade into the distance. My mind kept replaying the past, the things I should have seen long ago, but ignored because I loved her. I remembered the night 2 years ago, when Laura came home late after a party with coworkers. The smell of alcohol and unfamiliar perfume lingered in her hair. When I asked, she just scoffed. "You don't know how to have fun, Jack. You're always like an old man." I let that comment slide. Then another time, she changed her phone's password. When I asked, Laura snapped, "I need some personal space. Not everything has to be reported to you like I'm a kid." I thought I had done something wrong. I didn't want to fight. So I stayed silent, stepped back. I remembered the times Laura came home without asking if I had dinner. The weekends she disappeared from morning until night with the excuse of blowing off steam with friends. I remembered sitting alone in the kitchen, eating cold pizza, scrolling Facebook while seeing my wife's stories with other people, and the only feeling I had was, I didn't belong there anymore. Still, I said nothing. I thought maybe I just didn't know how to have fun, like she did. I blamed myself too much. Now, sitting among strangers on a long-distance bus, I finally understood. My marriage had died long ago. I just didn't have the courage to face it. Laura didn't betray me in a day. She slowly withdrew her love, extinguished my hope bit by bit, and built a cold wall between us. Maybe she wasn't seeing someone else, but she didn't love me anymore. What remained was resentment, weariness, and she took it all out on me, with her words, her actions, and ultimately, that cruel abandonment. I remembered one recent evening when Laura said bluntly, "I'm not happy. It feels like I'm living with an older brother, not a husband." I gave a weak laugh and asked, "So what do you want?" She didn't answer. Just turned away, picked up her wine glass, and turned the music up louder. I thought maybe it's just a rough patch. I kept enduring, hoping things would get better. But now it's clear. I was living in a one-sided marriage. I loved, while she merely tolerated. The bus stopped for a break at a roadside station near Amarillo. I got off, washed my face in the restroom, and looked straight into the mirror. The man in the reflection looked exhausted, stubbled, dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was no longer lost. I realized something important. I had sacrificed, endured, and stayed silent for too long. But that endurance didn't save the love. It only made me lose more of myself. I used to be a man full of energy, with dreams of opening my own garage, who loved pickup trucks and classic rock. I used to laugh out loud, loved wandering on weekends. But over the years, to please Laura, I shrank, changed my music tastes, gave up my friends, abandoned everything that made me feel like myself. I don't place all the blame on Laura. This failed marriage was the fault of both of us. But I was the one who allowed others to treat me with disrespect. Now that ends. When I arrived back in the city, it was already dark. I didn't go home right away. I went straight to the old bar that Jason, my best friend from college, and I used to frequent. It was just the same, soft music, warm lights, and the familiar table by the window. Jason showed up 30 minutes later. As soon as he saw me, his eyes widened. "Jesus! You're actually alive? Laura said you got back 2 days ago." I gave a faint smile. "I just got back. But I'm not the same man anymore." We sat down, drank some beer, and talked. I told Jason everything, from the cabin, to the letter, to the story, and even the text I received. He was angry on my behalf, but sighed. "I told you before. Laura isn't the same girl you married." I nodded. And I knew, it was true for me too. I wasn't the same guy I used to be, because now, I was ready to start over. The next morning, I moved back into my old apartment. Laura wasn't home. Maybe she was still vacationing somewhere, or maybe she was just avoiding me. Whatever the reason, I didn't care anymore. I stepped into the familiar apartment, a place that once felt like home, now suddenly cold like a soulless motel room. I went straight to the bedroom, pulled the suitcase out from under the bed, and took out all my clothes. The things Laura used to hate, my old leather jacket, rock band t-shirts, heavy boots, I had hidden them away. Now I put them on, like I was putting on my old self. Looking in the mirror, I no longer saw a defeated man. I saw someone who had just survived the cruelest betrayal, and was still standing. I called a lawyer. No small talk, no emotion. "I want to file for divorce. As soon as possible." The old lawyer, Whitman, was silent for a second, then replied. "Are you sure? Divorce after all those years?" I cut him off. "I've been sure since the moment I was left in the woods. No phone, no wallet, no one beside me, and they laughed at my pain." I had no more doubts. That same day, I started moving out. I rented a smaller apartment on the outskirts of the city, not fancy but warm. I didn't bring much, just clothes, my laptop, an old speaker, and a few childhood family photos. I wanted a fresh start, without Laura, without fake memories. A few days later, Laura came home. She texted me. "When did you get back? Not even a word?" I replied with just one. "Divorce." About 10 minutes later, she called. I didn't answer. The next message was longer, more accusatory. "It was just a joke. My friend told me to do it for fun. You're so petty, Jack." I stared at the message and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no regret. Just relief. Like taking off a suit of armor that had been too tight, too heavy for years. I started reconnecting with myself. No more nights spent watching romance movies Laura picked. I listened to classic rock again, plugged in my headphones, and let the music drown out all the exhaustion. I walked miles every morning, breathed in the fresh air, and felt my heart beating clearly in my chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I called an old friend who once asked me to partner up on opening a garage, Danny. He was stunned when I said, "You still want to open that garage?" I think I'm finally ready to do what I love. Danny burst out laughing. Jesus! You finally woke up. Hell yes, I've been waiting for you. We started planning. From an old rented garage in an industrial area, Danny and I began fixing it up, painting the walls, installing lifts, buying new tools. We worked late into the nights, covered in grease, tired but strangely fulfilled. I could feel the fire in my blood again, my hands creating something real, not just living up to someone else's expectations. On social media, Laura started posting different kinds of stories. No more parties. Just vague, sad posts, a glass of wine alone, a melancholy song, a status like, "You never know what you need until it's gone." I didn't care. One evening, she came to the garage. Wearing a long coat, light makeup, eyes red. She stood at the entrance, watching me working under an old Ford. "Jack!" she called. I slid out, wiped my hands on a rag, and stood up straight. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't think things would go this far." I nodded slightly. "I know. But it's over now." She was silent. Tried to say something but couldn't. I looked at her, the woman who used to be my wife, and felt nothing. The girl I once loved was no longer there. Just a stranger with once familiar eyes. I turned away and said the final words. "I'm not the same man anymore. And I don't regret leaving." She left in silence. That night, I drove out to the suburbs and stood in front of the freshly painted garage, watching as the sign was being hung. J&D Auto Works, honest service. Real people. I smiled. I was left behind in the woods like a joke. But from that very place, I found myself again. 3 months after I left Laura, J&D Auto Works officially opened. At first, it was just me and Danny, 2 guys with 4 calloused hands, a few old tools, and a hand-painted sign. But we had something more important, faith. The shop was in an old industrial area, not much foot traffic, but we didn't mind. I believed that if we did good work, the customers would come. And I was right. In just 2 weeks, we went from fixing a Chevy with a busted transmission to a Dodge with a blown fuse. The first customers came, tested us out, then came back. Word spread. "There's this small shop, but those guys are legit. No scams, no BS." We worked from early morning to late at night. Greasy fingers, worn out shoulders, but every time a customer said, "Thanks, my car runs great now," my heart felt warm like fire. I felt alive again, not a betrayed man, but someone rewriting his own story. Within 3 months, the garage's revenue surpassed expectations. We hired 2 more people, a young apprentice mechanic and an accountant who used to work at a dealership. Danny said, "I've never seen anyone turn their life around as fast as you, Jack." I laughed. But deep down, I knew I wasn't chasing success to get back at anyone. I just wanted to live true to myself. But if that success made the people who once looked down on me reconsider, well, that wasn't so bad either. One Saturday afternoon, while I was changing the oil on a Ram, I heard a car pull up. I looked up and saw a familiar face, Gina, one of Laura's friends, who had laughed the hardest when they left me in the woods. She wore business clothes, full makeup, but her eyes looked a little uneasy. "Jack? You run this place?" she asked. I stood up straight calmly. "Yeah. You need a repair?" She gave a nervous laugh. "Actually, my car's been slipping gears. I asked around, and they told me to try this place. Didn't expect to run into you." I didn't say much, just nodded and signaled to Danny to take the car. Gina stepped into the small office, looked around. She glanced at the price board on the wall, the maintenance certification by the door, then turned back and asked, "You're doing pretty well. Laura never mentioned any of this." I replied softly, "We don't keep in touch." Gina was quiet for a moment, then said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. That day, leaving you in the woods, that was crossing a line. We thought it was just a joke, but looking back, it was cruel." I said nothing. I just looked at her. And maybe that silence made her feel the weight of her own guilt more clearly. She left after giving me her number. If you ever need anything seriously, just call. But I knew I wouldn't. I didn't need fake connections anymore. A week later, I got an email from a local magazine. They wanted to write an article about our shop, after hearing so many great things from customers. They came to interview us, took some photos. I stood in front of the garage, in a grease-stained uniform, smiling wide. The article went live. 2 men, 1 dream. J&D Auto Works wins trust with honest work. Old friends called and texted. Some asked for jobs, others for advice. Jason, my best friend who had seen me at my lowest, messaged me. I'm proud of you, Jack. You made them all take notice. I wasn't seeking recognition, but that feeling, of being respected, admired, was incredible. That night, I stood alone in front of the garage. The autumn air was cool, streetlights casting a soft glow on the pavement. I looked at the new sign lit up with LED lights, and my heart felt still, like calm water. I thought about the past. About the day I was left behind like a joke. Then I thought about the present. I had a growing auto shop, a loyal team, a life without lies, without being led around. My heart felt light, as if I had just come through a storm and finally saw the sky again. And finally I understood. It's not revenge that makes us stronger, but the fact that we live better, more authentically, that's the deepest form of payback. 1 year after the day I was left in the woods, everything had changed, not with drama or noise like in a movie, but through quiet, steady steps. J&D Auto Works had become a well-known name in the area. Customers came not just from the town but from surrounding regions. We hired 2 more lead mechanics, invested in equipment, and launched a regular vehicle care service. I started receiving partnership offers from parts distributors and car dealerships, something I never even dreamed of before. And more importantly, I got to be myself. No one told me how to speak, how to dress, or how to live. I was no longer Laura's husband. No longer the guy left behind in the woods. I was Jack Miller, a man who had once fallen but stood back up with his own hands. One morning, I was cleaning the garage windows when someone honked. I looked out, a fancy SUV, with a familiar license plate. My heart skipped a beat, even though I thought I had no feelings left. Laura stepped out from the driver's seat. She was neatly dressed, light makeup, but the smugness she once carried was gone. There was something in her eyes, a weariness no amount of makeup could hide. "Hi," she said, standing at the shop entrance. I nodded and simply replied, "Hi." She held out her hand, a bit awkwardly. "I saw the article. Your shop was on the front page of the business section. I just wanted to say I'm happy for you." I shook her hand and let go right away. "Thanks," I said. "Is that why you came?" She hesitated. "No. I came to tell you that I was wrong. Everything I did that day. I know it can't be undone. But you have no idea how awful I felt afterward." I stayed silent. I didn't blame her. I didn't comfort her either. I just stood there, like a rock no longer shaken by waves. Laura took a deep breath and said, "I lost my job. My friend's company went bankrupt. I sold the house, moved back in with my mom. And you rose up stronger than ever." I looked at her, no anger, no regret. I had moved beyond the point where an apology could change anything. I said, "I don't hate you anymore. But I don't need you in my life anymore either." She nodded, trying to stay composed, but her eyes turned red. She walked away without another word. I stood there, watching her car leave the lot. No anger, no regret. Just another car leaving the shop, like so many others. That night, I went to a small cafe in town, where a local band was playing acoustic music. Not to meet anyone. Just because I had learned to enjoy simple things, a good song, a hot black coffee, the laughter of strangers. In a corner of the cafe, there was a woman reading a book. She didn't look at me, But her smile while talking to the waiter made me smile too, without even thinking. Not the sharp, showy kind of beauty like Laura, just something calm, sincere. Our eyes met once. Then again. I raised my cup and nodded. She did the same. I don't know what will happen after that. And I don't need to. I had learned how to stand up. How to heal myself. How to forgive myself for loving the wrong person, trusting the wrong people, and living the wrong life for so many years. And most importantly, I had learned this. Life doesn't need the approval of those who once looked down on you. It only needs you to rise, and live a life that no one can ever belittle again. I am Jack Miller. The man who was once left behind in the woods. And from that lowest place, I climbed up, and never looked back. Jack Miller's story is proof that sometimes, the deepest wounds become the strongest motivators. He was betrayed, humiliated, and abandoned, but instead of falling apart, he stood tall and rebuilt his life with determination and integrity. In real life, no one avoids setbacks, but what matters most is how we respond afterward. Living better, not out of revenge, but to prove that true worth belongs to those who never stop trying. What do you think about Jack Miller's journey? Did he make the right choice by staying silent and choosing to live better? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories and powerful lessons about family,